aspirants, I welcome you all to daily newspaper analysis of Shankar IAS Academy. Today's date is 25th of January 2025. Now, before getting into the list of articles, I have an important announcement for you. It is regarding our UPSC mock interview 2024. The mock interviews will be conducted from 27th to 30th in offline mode in Chennai branch. So, if you have not registered for this particular mock interview, you can get registered and get yourself evaluated before the final interview. So with this note, let us look into the list of articles that we are going to discuss today. In this first article, we'll be discussing in detail about this Fiscal Health Index, and in the second article, we'll be discussing about Spinal Muscular Atrophy, and in the third article, we'll be discussing about ADHD and what are all the symptoms or the implications of the particular disease, and in the fourth article, we'll be discussing about Rupee Depreciation. So without any delay, let us get into the news article discussion. Now look at the title of this article. It reads, Foreign Borrowings Turn Dearer for India Inc. as Rupee Falls. Here India Inc. is nothing but the formal sector in our country, which includes both the private as well as the government sector. So for them, getting foreign debt is becoming very difficult because the rupee is falling. So this is what the title actually hints, and this means that the article entirely talks about rupee depreciation. So what is this rupee depreciation? Let us understand that from the prelims perspective. So rupee depreciation is nothing but the decrease in value of Indian rupee against a foreign currency. For example, imagine currently 80 rupees should be paid to obtain $1. So when we call it as a depreciation is when we have to pay like 85 rupees to obtain this $1. So when here actually it appears that the money value is going up, but no, you have to pay a lot to obtain that $1. So this case we call it as depreciation. There is another term called appreciation. We call rupees appreciating when this 80 rupees becomes 75 rupees or 70 rupees. So when there is this very slight amount of increase in value of Indian rupee, then we will be calling it as appreciation. So have this basic understanding. Here we have to understand the reasons for this rupee depreciation. There are certain reasons. Firstly, higher imports. So when we import a lot of goods from outer or the foreign countries, we have to pay them a lot of dollars, right? So this leads to forex resource depletion in the first place. Secondly, we have to pay a lot of when the forex resource is very limited, lot of people will be offering a lot of money to get that forest resource. So what happens? Eventually rupee will depreciate because lot of money will be paid to obtain that $1. So this is the first very basic cause for rupee depreciation. And the second important thing is inflation. So what happens when inflation happens? The rupee will actually lose its value. So if you are getting one pen for 5 rupees and currently this one pen becomes 10 rupees, then it is obviously obviously inflation, right? So this loss of purchasing power of a particular currency will also lead to depreciation. Then the capital outflow. So what happens when capital outflow happens is a foreign company, they will just sell out their entire investment inside the country, which leads to increase in supply of the domestic currency. So this also indirectly leads to inflation and indirectly leads to depreciation of rupee. And then global uncertainties, for example, the increase in the fuel cost, or especially when we are dependent on import, then all these global uncertainties will also have an implication of rupees value. So these are very important factors that you have to remember. So apart from this, one important impact or a positive impact that you have to remember is this depreciation actually helps in boosting the exports. So what happens is when a lot of exports happens while rupee is depreciating, then lot of forex resource will be coming to our country, which also improve the economy as a whole. But what is the issue with India is whenever rupee is depreciating, the import is alone increasing, but the export is depreciating. So in case of India, since export is not happening and import is always increasing, we are having very bad impact on our rupee depreciation. Remember this. And another important thing is there will be increased remittances. So if a person, for example, an NRI who is working abroad, if they send money to their home country, then they will be getting a lot of money when the rupee is being depreciated. So these are the positive impacts of it. Now the negative impacts, there are a lot of things. Firstly, higher import cost. So what happens when a particular product has higher import cost? Obviously it leads to inflation, right? So for example, crude oil and any kind of electronic gadget that we are actually importing, we are paying for the rupee depreciation in the first place. Remember that. And then we, as I said in the news article discussion itself, the debt cost will be rising. So priorly you have to pay very lower amount, but now if you are borrowing from the foreign countries, you have to pay a lot of money. And then widening trade deficit. So as I said, India, we are not exporting a lot of things. So when import is greater, the trade deficit is going to widen. So this is a very bad impact. Fourthly, we have a reduced investor confidence. So this also may lead to a lot of capital outflow. And finally, as I said, the increase in cost of products. So these are all certain negative impacts of rupee depreciation. So far we saw about what is rupee depreciation, what are all the positive and negative impacts of rupee depreciation. From the basics, questions will be there, and we have here a model preliminary question. Let me read out the question. You have to find what will be the impact of rupee depreciation. Three statements are given. It increases the cost of imports for India. It enhances the competitiveness of Indian exports in global markets. Then it leads to a decrease in the value of remittances sent by NRIs. So here the question is about rupee depreciation and not appreciation. So remember that, and then you have to try to answer this particular question. So what will be the correct answer? The correct answer is option A, 1 and 2 only. Third statement is incorrect. So with these learned points, now let us move on to the next news article discussion. Now look at this article that talks about a rarest genetic disease called spinal muscular atrophy, in short called as SMA. Now currently this is in news because a health activist and a patient who is affected by this particular disease has asked the government to reduce the cost of treatment of this particular genetic disease, and that is why it is in news. So from the prelims perspective, knowing about the basics of this SMA is very important. So let's start with what is this spinal muscular atrophy. So it is actually a hereditary disease caused by SMN1 gene mutation. So when there is a mutation in particular gene, to be specific the SMN1, in this particular gene, if there is a mutation, this leads to SMN protein deficiency. So when this SMN protein deficiency happens, it leads to loss of motor neurons in the spinal cords. So what happens is the signal from the skeletal muscle and the brain will be cut off if this particular neurons are not present. So what happens ultimately, the symptoms will be like you cannot have proper motor functioning in your body itself entirely. For example, you cannot even button your shirt, you cannot swallow anything, because everything are transmitted by these neurons. So when these motor neurons are not present, then we call it as the spinal muscular atrophy. Here you can see some of other common symptoms, for example the muscle weakness, then the difficulty in breathing, lack of muscle tone, then diminished reflexes, and even spinal curvature. So here, why this particular thing happens is the most important question. It is actually a autosomal recessive disease, which means autosomal itself means we require 24 chromosomes, right? So in this, two chromosomes or sex chromosomes that determine the sex of that particular child. So apart from these two chromosomes, there are 22 non-sex chromosomes that actually defines the body structure of a particular child. So when any one of this particular chromosome has a deficiency that leads to SMN1 mutation, gene mutation, then this particular spinal muscular atrophy will happen. So to have this particular genetic disorder, both the parents should have this gene mutation. Okay, so here you can see the normal functioning of a particular motor neurons. Here, this is the SMA affected motor neurons and muscle cells. So, having seen about the basics of SMA, now we have to see about the treatment process. Here, there are two important treatment process. One is going for therapy, where oral medications will be given. A very important oral medication is this Risdiplam, and we can go for gene therapy. Both are very expensive, and that is why the health activist has asked for the support from the government. This is because in our country, under Article 21, right to life and personal liberty is there, which is a fundamental right. So we have a right to health under this particular Article 21, and it is government's duty to provide adequate health care. Okay, so that is why he has insisted for this particular support. Now, coming back to the treatment, we have Risdiplam, which is actually a oral medication. What this Risdiplam does is it modifies the SMN gene splicing. So this leads to increased functional SMN protein, which again leads to increase in the presence of motor neurons, which whose deficiency is the main cause for SMA. Now, moving on, we saw about the constitutional provision, right? This has been insisted in the particular landmark judgment, which is the Paschim Banga Khet Mazdoor Samity versus State of West Bengal. So, in this particular case, the Supreme Court has insisted that the denial of timely treatment violates Article 21, and it's the state's responsibility to ensure the access to the healthcare. So these are all very important facts that you have to remember when it comes to SMA and the landmark judgment with respect to Article 21 and the right to health. Now I have a preliminary question for you. Here there are two statements. First statement says spinal muscular atrophy is a genetic disorder caused by mutation in SMN1 gene leading to muscle weakness and atrophy. So the second statement says Risdiplam is an oral medication approved for the treatment of SMA that helps increase the production of SMN protein. Here both the statements are correct. So the correct answer is option C, both 1 and 2. So with these learned points, now let us move on to the next news article discussion. Now look at this article. The annual Fiscal Health Index of Indian states has been released by NITI Aayog. So in this news article discussion, we are going to see about two different things. Firstly, what is this Fiscal Health Index, FHI, and then we'll be seeing about NITI Aayog. So let's start with FHI. See, this FHI is nothing but a report released by NITI Aayog annually, which assesses and gives the exact status of every state's fiscal health. So the objective of this particular index is to just point out who are all doing well and which state should focus a lot on which area. So here the resource mobilization and the expenditure management and fiscal prudence is the priority when it comes to this particular fiscal health index. Now let us see about the criteria for this fiscal health index. See, the first thing is, as I said earlier, revenue mobilization. So here the state's revenue generation in terms of both tax and non-tax revenue will be calculated. Then in the terms of expenditure management, they will be talking about effective resource allocation. So how effectively the resources has been utilized through the outcomes. So the measurable outcomes will be taken in this particular parameter. Then we have a debt index, which tells about the debt level and the repayment capacity of that particular state. For example, Odisha has 99 points when it comes to this debt index, so, which means it has the highest capacity to repay its loans. And then we have debt sustainability. So this parameter talks about how sustainably a state can take this particular debt, so without any kind of fiscal instability causing in the particular state. So in that also Odisha has actually topped like 64 points. Then we have a debt to GSDP ratio. GSDP is nothing but a gross state domestic product. So here the state's debt and the gross domestic product of the state will be compared. So based on that, the points will be given. So these are all very important criterias when it comes to fiscal health index. So in examination, what will be asked is these criterias will be just given, and they will be asking you to choose which one of them is actually a criteria or which one of them is not actually a criteria. So those kinds of question can be asked in the preliminary question. Now moving on, there are three different classifications. Firstly, the front runners, they are like the topmost, then comes the achievers, then come the aspirational states. So the front runners are like Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Telangana, and we have achievers Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Goa, and Jharkhand. They have actually reached, they have made a significant progress when it comes to fiscal health, and we have Punjab, West Bengal, and Andhra Pradesh and Kerala in the third stage. Now, moving on, we shall see about NITI Aayog. See, NITI Aayog is actually an body that has been formed very recently in 1st January 2015. It has actually replaced the planning commission which was there priorly. So we had 5-year plans before this NITI Aayog. Now this NITI Aayog currently acts as a think tank. So its full form is National Institution for Transforming India. So as the name itself suggests, it works for transforming India, but in a different form by acting as a think tank. So the very basic objective of this particular thing is to bring in cooperative federalism, which means a lot of emphasis on states will be given, and promoting innovation. Lot of ideas will be discussed, and sustainable development. So sustainable development itself means development not only for the current generation but also for the future generation. So moving on, we shall see about the functions of NITI Aayog. See, the first thing is implementing or suggesting or achieving the sustainable development goals. For that, any kind of ideas will be discussed in this particular forum. Then the policy formulation. So as I said, it is a think tank, which means it provides a lot of suggestion. And even for example, India 2047 vision is actually a part of NITI Aayog. And as I said, it is a forum for cooperative federalism. For example, Team India Hub and the DMEO are certain initiatives when it comes to cooperative federalism. Then we have monitoring and evaluation being done in NITI Aayog. For example, scheme implementation and the impact assessments will be discussed here. And we have fostering innovation through schemes like this Atal Innovation Mission. Now, moving on, we shall see about the structure of NITI Aayog. Firstly, the chairman or the chairperson is our Prime Minister of India. Then comes the vice chairperson. He is appointed by Prime Minister. He will be in the cabinet rank. Then we have governing council, which includes all the chief ministers and the lieutenant governors, and there are certain full-time members who are experts in certain domains, and we have special invitees in special meetings. For example, the eminent personalities will be asked to appear in front of NITI Aayog whenever called for. So these are all the structure of NITI Aayog. Now moving on, we shall see certain key initiatives of NITI Aayog. Firstly, the aspirational districts program. See, in this particular scheme, certain districts that are not performing well when it comes to all the social indicators, those kinds of underdeveloped districts will be chosen, and special emphasis will be given on those kinds of districts. Then we have the Atal Innovation Mission, in which the entrepreneurship and innovation is actually emphasized. Then we have digital India initiatives. For example, all the AI policy has been discussed. Then we have National Health Stack, which is nothing but the health insurance program. So this health stack is nothing but building up a big data. This data will be including all the people in our country. Then we have initiatives like DigiLocker, which is a secure platform for any kind of digital documents. So these are all certain key initiatives of NITI Aayog that you have to remember. So here I have mentioned certain important indices or reports. You can just go through the reports on indices. It can be asked in the preliminary examination. Now we have a preliminary practice question. Here three statements are given. First statement says NITI Aayog is established by an act of parliament. Second statement says it promotes cooperative federalism. Third statement says it releases the health indices and SDG in India index. Here the correct answer is option B, 2 and 3 only. Yeah, the first statement is incorrect because it was created by a resolution passed by Union Cabinet. That is why the first statement is incorrect. So with these learned points, now let us move on to the next news article discussion. Now look at this article that talks about ADHD. ADHD can be expanded as attention deficit hyperactive disorder. So a recent study conducted by six UK-based researchers has identified that people with ADHD have lesser life expectancy than normal people. So nearly 9 years of lesser life expectancy has been observed in a study, and that is why ADHD is in news today. So let us revise about ADHD from the prelims perspective. See, this attention deficit hyperactive disorder is actually a neurodevelopmental condition. So it will be impacting the attention and then hyperactivity and impulsivity of a particular individual. So it actually affects approximately 5% of school aged children globally. So it happens during the developmental period of the child, which means like 0 to 5 years. So very few will be persisting to the adulthood, and there will be a lot of symptoms that will be affecting the cognitive, emotional, and social ability of a particular individual. If we tell about the cognitive symptoms, they will be forgetting everything, and they will be having difficulty in focusing a particular thing, and they are disorganized in nature. And when we talk about the behavioral symptoms, they are always fidgeting and express. Fidgeting is nothing but making small moves with hands or legs in order to express nervousness. So they will be excessively talking sometime. They will have impulsivity as well. And when we talk about the social symptoms, they will have very difficult to connect with the peers, and they are very bad in turn taking as well as listening. So these are all certain symptoms of ADHD. Now, what are all the causes of ADHD? The first cause is the strong genetic component. It is inherited, and the potential environmental factors can also cause this ADHD to a particular child. And the brain development pattern may vary on different individuals, which can also cause ADHD. Talking about the treatment of ADHD, there is behavioral therapy for which a coping mechanism can be developed, and we can bring in a lot of social skills by giving a lot of therapies. Then there are medications which is both stimulant as well as non-stimulant alternatives are there. So all these depends on the degree of the disease, and we have challenges in India when it comes to ADHD. For example, we are underdiagnosed individuals with ADHD. So there is a lot of limited awareness, and especially in the rural area, there are very limited awareness when it comes to this ADHD, which leads to underdiagnosis. And there is also social stigma and taboo surrounding the mental health of the people. Right? This also hinders the recovery of the patients with ADHD. Then we have limited resources, for example, lack of trained professionals as well as diagnostic tools when it comes to ADHD. Moving on, we have certain government initiatives when it comes to mental health. For example, we have Mental Health Care Act 2017. It gives the right to mental health care. And we have the Manodarban initiative, a very important initiative that you have to remember, which promotes mental health even for students. So it is actually against suicide, and it provides a lot of guidance with patients who are actually going through a depression. So what will be the way forward for this particular disease and the shortcomings? See, the first thing is we have to improve awareness, especially in a rural area, as well as we have to train the professionals or bring in a lot of experts to collaborate. Then we have to promote early diagnosis, which will increase the recovery rate, as well as we have to bring in a lot of intervention to actually bring in diagnosis in rural areas. Finally, we have to increase funding when it comes to infrastructure for mental health. So these are all important facts that you have to remember. Now I have a preliminary question, which what is the objective of the Mental Health Care Act 2017 in India? The correct answer is option B, to provide the right to mental health care and access to services. So with this, we came to the end of the news article discussion. If you like the video, hit like, do comment, and don't forget to subscribe to Shankar IAS Academy YouTube channel. Now, thank you so much for listening.